Greetings and good morning. Welcome. Welcome to the NAACP San Diego branch and SDSU Black Minds Project, working together to improve outcomes for all Black children and families. My name is Katrina Hassan Hamilton. And before we get started, I want to make sure that we're all settled in. It's 10 o'clock. We're going to give everyone maybe a minute or so to settle in before we continue. Excellent. It's wonderful seeing all of your beautiful faces today on this Saturday morning. All right. So again, my name is Katrina Hassan Hamilton. I am the NAACP San Diego branch education chair. And I do welcome you again on behalf of our branch to this amazing symposium. I do want to say before I start that our celebrity guest or special moderator, Omari Fleming, was unable to be here today to moderate because he and his wife, Kelly, have just given birth to their beautiful baby boy named Logan. So we congratulate Omari and his wife and family, and we wish them all the best. Looking forward, he said he's looking forward to coming to our next symposium, which, save the date, will be March 22nd. So you'll hear me say that again. I also want to say that one of our speakers, Mohammed Khas, is not going to be able to be here. And if anyone knows Mohammed Khas, you know he's a hard worker. He's always there. Dr. Luke Wood had a Black Minds Matter symposium, and we blinked and Mohammed was all the way in Minneapolis. He was interviewing people on the street right after the aftermath and the tragic murder of George Floyd. So anyone who knows Mohammed knows that he's amazing, but he will be with us next time as well. So because of our theme, I thought to myself, instead of panicking, what should I do? We always talk about Black families, we talk about, our youth, but rarely do we ever engage our youth. So you are in for a treat because I want to introduce two amazing young people to you today. We have Malik Palmore. Malik is a senior in the Sweetwater Union High School District. Malik is a third-degree Black belt. He's a pianist. He loves classical music. He loves Christian music. He loves hip hop. He's very versed. And Malik is currently working towards his EMT certification. So in a few minutes, you won't have to hear me talk, but you will be graced with hearing Malik. And then I also want to introduce Mara Sparks. What can I say about Mara? Mara is a junior. She is a junior extraordinaire. She has a 4.4 GPA and maybe higher than that, so I know she will correct me at some point. Mara is on the varsity cheerleading team at her high school. She is also a former track star, and Mara aspires to be, like Malik, in the medical field. She wants to be a surgeon, and she will be going, God willing, to Howard University. So without further ado, I'm going to turn the program over to my amazing moderators, Malik Palmore and Mara Sparks. Malik, please introduce our phenomenal panelists that we have today.
Good morning, everyone. As she said, I'm Malik Palmore. I would like to begin by introducing our panelists, Dr. Grace Carroll, a wordsmith at LLC. Could you please introduce yourself? Let us know more about you.
Okay. My name is Grace Carroll. I like to tell people I'm retired. I currently created a series of children's books that's just focused on literacy, because as a teacher, professor at UC Berkeley and at Howard University, and for a minute at Stanford, I really realized we have brilliant minds, and a lot of our children of color come in and they obviously had to be brilliant to pass through the hoops of getting in. However, there were just little basic things that I noticed about just language, that although they might be very good at putting some things together, their speech, some of the things they needed were just basic things they didn't get when they were very young. And I just believe that literacy is so critical. that when I retired from teaching and doing research in family, Black family and child development, I decided I would deal with my grandchildren. I am now waiting for the, what is it, the 11th to be born this week. And they were very inspirational in me following up and creating not only the LLC with the books, but the companion Akira's Book Club, which basically we provide books and services, consultation, various things to local programs, local schools and families around literacy. Basically my training, my PhD is in sociology of education, got it in 1975 at Stanford, where I spent 8 years, because that's also where I got my BA and my MAs and my teaching credential. I had it pretty good there, so I stayed for that full 8 years.
Thank you very much. I would like to continue on by introducing Dr. Idira Essing, Assistant Professor of Child and Family Development for San Diego State University. Would you like to take a minute to tell us more about yourself?
Sure. Thank you, Malik. And thank you to NAACP for inviting me. I'm very excited to share a little bit about our project that we're working on with Dr. Wood and Mohammed. But yes, my name is Idara Essien. I am an assistant professor at San Diego State University in Child and Family Development. I've been there for about 4 years now. And it's been a good experience. And I see my colleague, I'm going to give a special shout out to Dr. Felicia Black, another professor that I work closely with as well. Yeah, so I'm really excited to share our project that we have been working on for the past 4 years. And part of my research is really to understand the experiences of Black children and their families, and seeing how, in understanding these dynamics that play out for them in an educational space. And so I have a couple things that I would love to share, and a couple just a glimpse of hope that we have seen with working with parents in several different schools and several different districts. So I'm excited to be here. Thank you so much, Malik.
Of course. I'd like to introduce, following that, Mohammed Kaas, researcher for SDSU's The Black Lines Project. Please give us a moment and tell us about yourself.
And thank you, Malik. Mohammed had an emergency.
Oh, that's correct.
Yes, that's okay. No, you're doing great. Thank you.
Okay, my name is Mars Sparks, and I will start off by introducing Salam Gebi Christos at MSDSU, co-director of MA in Education program with a concentration in counseling. She's also a counselor at San Diego City College. Ms. Salam, would you like to tell us anything more about yourself?
Thank you. I'm also a licensed marriage and family therapist. I've been practicing for 10 years, and I'm really excited to be here because we're talking about mental health differently in our community, and it's exciting. I've been waiting for this moment. So I'll stop there. And I work with former foster youth at San Diego City College. So it ties in perfectly with my my marriage and family therapy background. And a lot of the work that I do is trauma informed, and how, and so I'll talk a little bit about that later on.
Thank you. Last but not least, I will introduce Rashida Hamid, President and CEO of Epiphany Women in Focus and Epiphany Project. Ms. Rashida, would you like to tell us anything more about yourself?
Good morning, and thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited, especially when I heard trauma-informed care. I think that's like pivotal, a pivotal piece in working with students of color within our school districts. And so I'm really excited to learn more about the different projects that are going on. I currently contract with the San Diego Unified School District to provide restorative practices within the classrooms and on the campuses. Also, we contract with the San Diego County District Attorney's Office, where we get referrals for adult women who are also needing those safe spaces to heal from some of the generational traumas that they've experienced. So thank you so much for having me, and I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Thank you. I'll turn it back over to Malik Palmer.
Thank you very much, Mara. Thank you a lot, Mrs. Hamid. I'd like to continue by asking some questions. So, Mrs. Selim, with the dual pandemic of COVID-19 and racial trauma, along with the push for reopening of schools, Black children, and for that matter, all children are going to return to school traumatized. Given that stigma on mental health and counseling in our community, what can we do to support Black students and families, including Black immigrants who are in need of counseling and intervention, especially when there is a lack of cultural congruent mental health professions in the first place?
Thank you. What a great question. I'm going to just start talking about my two daughters that have a middle school and a high schooler. And I think when I first even talked to Katrina, we were really, talked about this event, but we ended up talking about our children and how COVID is relating, to impacting our children. And so the San Diego Unified School District sent out an email. I got one from the district, I got one from their separate schools, saying that school might open up soon as April, right? And in this email, it talked about safety protocols when we return to school and what that's gonna look like, right? But nowhere in there, and you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, it talked about mental health. It didn't address trauma. It didn't say, when your child returns, here's what it's going to look like if trauma occurs, if the behavioral issues occur, right? None of that. So I want to start there. In addition to that, in our community, we had COVID, but we also had the racial trauma that we experienced in 2020 and beyond that, right? But it was really just in the front. Nobody can hide from it. And so again, we're talking about our children going back to school because we've been out for a year. Our children have been out for a year. So again, we're not addressing that with our schools. So that's not addressed. So what I like to start with is we have no idea what it will look like when, when our students are returning to school. And life is tough right now for children of all ages. Many parents are seeing their children experiencing anxiety, sadness, behavioral challenges, just being home and having to homeschool, whether it's on Zoom or even if they're hybrid half-time. And so, parents are really wondering, and the nation, is this going to traumatize our children? So it really depends on the child, right? And it depends on the experience that the child is also having at home. And so right now, we can't hide again, right? It's on television that our children, our Black children, are seeing that members of our community are 3 times likely to get COVID, okay? And last year, how many times did, we watch George Floyd die in front of us? We witnessed it. And we heard about Breonna Taylor and so many others that we witnessed them die. So what is that doing to our children? Right? How is that impacting us? And so, and they're also hearing, so that's one. And then the other thing is the piece is, how does COVID look within your home and your community? Because one thing about our community is we don't separate our individual from the collective self. We're always a representative of all instead of, and being a mental health clinician, this is something that we struggle because we don't just think about how it's impacting us, we think how it's impacting others. So then we kind of normalize trauma in our communities because, if I talk to my cousin, she has the same experience. If I talk to my colleagues and they're Black, they're having similar experiences as I am. So we normalize it and we kind of just don't, address it. And so where is that? The emotional impact, where does that go? It just sits in us, right? So really important to first discuss what is trauma and how is it even measured, right? To understand it, trauma it's an event that has happened. Traumatic event happens when somebody's physically threatened or they witness that of it happening to someone else. There's a physical harm, danger to a true traumatic event. Right, so it is important to note that the event itself is not defined or not something. It's not the event that's defined whether or something that's traumatic. Trauma is really about the individual's reaction to the event. And so you may think of 2 kids that got into siblings that were in a car accident. One may have a traumatic experience, the other one may not, because they think, whoa, like they just have a different way of handling it. And so one of the things that for our community that's important to think about is complex trauma, where that is, think of it in this way, I'm just simplifying it, is to say we may be experiencing trauma at home, right? So during COVID, domestic violence, or parents having to work multiple jobs. There's a lot of trauma, but you leave your home, you get on your bus, or you're walking to where you need to get to. When we're in school, you are experiencing trauma, racial trauma maybe, and then you get to school and you're also, so there's layers of trauma with our community. The other piece is the interracial trauma. And this is form, I have to take it back to slavery. It's really important to do that. And you may think, oh my God, this happened so long ago. Why can't we just move on? Why can't they move on? More we hear that, right? But we're talking about people being captured, ships, sold, beaten, raped, experimented on, trauma, right? And then we're freed, no help. So trauma, no help, freed, no help, and we're experiencing racial trauma over and over again, and it's not ever addressed. We are not ever talking about what that felt like, because Africans were Africans in Africa. They were slaves when they came to America. And so we had a life, we had a way of being that was taken and ripped from us. Okay. And so interracial trauma is when that experience is passed on from one generation to the next. We may not have physically experienced it, but the stories we have in our communities, and by talking about it, we are experiencing that trauma. So it looks different. So ways that you can, so how is trauma informed, right? There's a 10 question survey developed by a Kaiser physician, actually from San Diego, Dr. Vincent Felitti, and it was done on an obesity test where it was a research test on obesity. And so he found out that half of the participants dropped out. And so he sought them out. He sought the people that dropped out, and it was really related to, so he did a one-on-one discussion with them to figure out like, what is going on? Why are they dropping out of this study? Because he couldn't understand it. So it turned out he was asking questions like, what was your birth weight? Weight related. And then he asked this one woman, what was her weight when she first had her first sexual encounter? She was 40 pounds. She was a child. She was sexually assaulted as a child. So then it was that piece. Eating for her was a coping mechanism. So think about our community. What is those coping mechanisms that we're doing related to the trauma, generational trauma, intergenerational, just current trauma that we are? What are we doing with that trauma? Because we don't go to mental health therapists. We're not talking about it. So how does this, that going back to that question, will trauma, COVID impact our children? We don't know yet, but it is in a sense, because it might not be trauma, but it could be adjusting to new ways of doing things. So it's important to pay attention to your child, because their institution won't, right? So you're watching for behavioral changes. You're watching for ways that, sorry, I'm looking at my notes, that your child is it's not up to the institutions or somebody else trying to figure that out for us. And so it's really important to, just give me a second, I'm looking at my notes. So when do you seek mental health for your child, right? One thing in our communities is that we should not shy away from seeking mental health services for our child. I prefer that, when I'm thinking about even my own children, to go to a therapist that has had the same experience or similar experience than my children. But it's also, you could even look at the idea of group therapy instead of your child, because common reactions that your child might show is anger, confusion, sadness, hurt, fear, guilt, withdrawal. Withdrawal is a huge one, denial, shame. There's so many things of the consequences, nightmares, physical symptoms. difficult concentrating. So all these things like related to, the one thing and most importantly is check in with your child, right? What is going on? And you can always share with your child what, you know, your own experience of what's going on with you in terms that they'll understand. But it's really important to teach your child coping mechanisms. It starts at home. And if you don't have those tools or skills like that, there's places that you can learn. So I think I'm going to stop there. Yeah, thank you.
Very much. And with that, I'd like to pass it on to Mara.
You and thank you. I'm sorry. Thank you, Ms. Salam, for your response. Rashida Hamid, we watched a 9-year-old African-American girl get pepper sprayed by Rochester police in New York. We also witnessed the interaction between the child and her mother. Ms. Hamid, how can we support some families and students in school when they are experiencing trauma at home? Also, what advice would you give for schools to stop blaming parents for the trauma their children experience at home and in school? Would that include restorative healing?
Thank you very much, Mara. I really appreciate the question. And it is a complex question. So I'm going to try and dissect each piece of the question. I really feel like blaming the parents is counterproductive. Trying to find blame for trauma that is experienced doesn't solve the issue of the trauma that's taking place. Although a lot of times the trauma that's experienced in the home can be attributed to the parenting. A lot of times we have to understand that, especially when we're talking about Black students, they come a lot of times from underserved communities. And so a lot of the trauma that is experienced by those young people, it's generational. A lot of times the parents don't know better ways of parenting. So I feel as though holding them accountable is definitely important, but placing blame is counterproductive. So as opposed to trying to blame, maybe getting an understanding of the trauma, because trauma is on a large continuum. There are students who go to bed each night without dinner. That can be traumatizing, as well as those who are latchkey and trying to figure out virtual learning on their own because there is no parent in the household. If we're being honest, most households in the Black community have just the one parent, and they're trying to navigate work, raising young people, and a lot of times the students get lost in all of that. So I feel like offering support. I did hear the previous woman speak about it not being the institution's job or responsibility to check in with our young people. And honestly, because our schools prior to COVID especially are where our young people spend a lot of their time, I think it is important for the staff of the school to become trauma informed so that they can recognize different signs that indicate that there is or could possibly be trauma taking place within the home. So blaming the parent, I mean, it's convenient at times, because then it allows you not to feel responsible for the behaviors that are taking place with that young person. But at the same time, I feel like, yes, we do need to hold the parents accountable, but also if the schools or those who notice that the parents aren't doing their best or what we feel they should do, maybe we can offer supportive services, try and figure out what the trauma is that the young person is facing and try and deal directly with that trauma. Meeting these young people and their parents where they're at, because a lot of times if the parent doesn't know better, then it's not easy for them to do better. And so I feel that it's important for all adults, almost the village mentality, to jump in and offer support where you see a parent is lacking. Yes, blaming them. And oftentimes I want to blame the parents, but then when we get into understanding the trauma at hand, a lot of times the parent themselves have experienced similar traumas and just don't have the coping skills or the ability to break that generational cycle. So yes, it would include restorative healing. Restorative, really, just what are we restoring? We're actually restoring those who have been harmed. We're restoring relationships at times. We're restoring the well-being and the feeling of community for those young people. And so restorative healing is going to be key. Empathy is also going to be key, putting yourself in the shoes of these young people and their parents, understanding that sometimes they have more on their plate than they would even like at times. And so, us as adults, especially those who work within the district or with young people, we can do some small things just to try and build rapport with those students so that they feel safe enough with us to come and share some of the things that they may be experiencing. So maybe a weekly check-in with the young person, asking open-ended questions about maybe how their day was today, or is there anything that we as adults can do to support them being more able to pay attention. I mean, we just have to offer any supportive services that we're familiar with based on the behaviors that we're witnessing from that young person. There is no one size fits all solution because each situation is unique to that household or that individual. So, it's just whenever we do get an opportunity to introduce any type of restorative practice. And that a lot of times people hear restorative practice and think of restorative justice, which does fall under that umbrella, but restorative justice is more of the disciplinary aspect of restorative practices. So there are restorative healing circles where you can build community within that classroom or that school setting or even that household, where you can allow a safe space for that young person to feel safe enough and trusting enough to share what may really be going on. Very recently, there was a young person who reached out to a food bank that said that, they mentioned it on a Zoom meeting in a classroom, that they go to bed hungry, often. And the food bank stepped up, got word of it, stepped up and provided an unlimited amount of food to that young person. And so now but only because she felt safe enough in the space that was created for her did that conversation come up. So I think, placing blame is neither here nor there. We need to educate, we need to be supportive, and we need to use empathy in every dealing that we have with a young person. And I'll stop there, but thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hamid, for the lovely answer. I'll turn it back over to Malik.
Thank you very much, Amara, Mrs. Hamid. And speaking of trying to understand our younger Black students, Dr. Essain, you're a professor and a researcher. As a matter of fact, you have a current study on parents and Black preschoolers that I'd like for you to share with our participants this morning. But first, when we typically think of discrimination against children and families, we think of low poverty, low socioeconomic, single parenting. However, we are learning that socioeconomics is not always the case for Black families. Please share with us your own experiences and how they led to your current study.
Thank you, Malik. I'm actually going to share my screen if that's okay. And what I want to share is part of a project that I have been working on with Dr. Wood. And I completely agree with you, Rashida and Salim. My biggest fear, even as a parent, is once the kids are transitioning back into school, are we heading into a darker reality? I think oftentimes we forget about the experiences of what our children have gone through in schools, because we have been gone for so long, for about a year. And now that they're back in the classroom, are we revisiting those school-based traumas that are happening in schools? And so this is part of my project. It's titled Our Voices, and it's about the experiences of Black children in early childhood education. And it's where we have elicited over 700 narratives from parents across the nation, narratives of Black children, narratives from parents of Black children. And I say parents of Black children because the parents may be of different races who have Black children. So something to think about is that we have been part of a few reports that really discuss about suspensions. We have When They Teach Us, that's part of San Diego County, and then our new piece that's coming out called A Negative Piece, the suspensions of Black children in San Diego. So please look out for those two to understand. But what I want to talk about is that within our study, within the 700 parents of Black children, we noticed that these experiences were typified by microaggressions, subtle insults, things that should not happen in the classroom that did. And we started to notice that there were patterns, patterns that showed that there were connections to stereotypes of distrust, disregard, and disdain, that our children were made, there was this assumption of criminality, this ascribe of intelligence, like there was a sense of surprise of them being intelligent. There was a connection to pathologizing culture as well. There was this assumption that they came from unstructured homes, single parent homes, or fatherless homes. And I want to make this clear because it is definitely something that that was quite disturbing in our study, where educators had already, from the parents, they had discussed how educators had already made up their minds before children had walked into the classroom. So let me say that again. Before the children had even started, the educators that were discussed in our report, they had already made up their minds about Black children and their families. And so there is two books that I do recommend. One is called Black Minds Matter, and another one is called No BS. The BS is bad statistics, and it's called Black People Need People Who Believe in Black People Enough Not to Believe Every Bad Thing They Hear About Black People. The Black Minds Matter is from J. Luke Wood, and the other one is from Ivory Tolson. Those are two great resources, and something that I use in my class because it's important to understand the factors that contribute to student success. And what they found out is that there was a significant relationship for academic achievement and success when it related to Black children with a quality of life, being tired in the morning and feeling lonely. So when we think about these, almost these stereotypes of how we portray Black children, it's like, oh, you come from a very unstructured home, so you won't be able to make it. So then that's how they engage families and children. And that has an effect on their success. So going back to our study, is I did mention how those three items, and I wanted to show you, and I know that Dr. Wood spoke about that on Tuesday, and that was the disdain, distrust, and disregard, and how these are part of the narratives from what parents had discussed. And you can go ahead and read, I won't read through every single one, but this is where the assumption of criminality began to take place, where they assumed that our children were troublemakers in the study. They were labeled as criminals, or they used criminalized language. They were hyper surveilled, meaning that they were looked at more. And there's a study on this, it's called an implicit bias study by Gilliam, in which he had teachers observed, and he told them, it was a deceptive study. So it wasn't a real thing that was happening in the study, but he made it appear like as if children in his study were doing something wrong, and he wanted to tell the teachers to figure out which child was doing something wrong. And it showed that the Black teachers were choosing the Black children, even though that there was nothing happening in the classroom. And he came to a conclusion that if you were part of the 3 Bs, big, black, and boy, you were hyper surveilled or looked after more than other children. And so that's what we were starting to see in our study. So singled out, that they were being harshly punished, viewed in a disorder-based lens. And when I speak about assumed to be troublemakers, it would be often where kids would speak about, maybe there was an altercation between children, and the teacher would side with another child and mention you can see the first narrative where it said, well, the other kid said you started it. So she took his word for it without even hearing from the other children or from that particular child. Some other ones that came up as well as the labels in which their children were described in parent-teacher conference meetings or interactions with teachers, how they would describe their children as aggressive or defiant. It was just these really criminalization types of language, troublemaker even. They mentioned even the children themselves, they didn't understand what microaggressions were. They didn't understand what was happening, but they knew where, oh, she's always watching me, mom. She's always watching me. There was an instance, a situation where I interviewed a parent, and she mentioned how she went into becoming a room parent. And the teacher, like within the first 2 minutes, she was describing a kid named Jamal. And this is the second paragraph here. And she said that, the teacher said, oh, you need to watch out for Jamal. He takes the scissors, and she kind of villainized him. It was like, this kid who had scissors, you better be careful. And within the same situation or the same conversation, Johnny turns around, Johnny, blonde hair, blue eyes, turns around, is doing the same thing. And she turns to him and says, oh, Johnny, is that the right thing to do? So it's like there's this different way that they're engaging with the children in the study. Another part was singled out for discipline. Oftentimes what we saw is that children were participating in something that they probably shouldn't have been participating in, but one was reprimanded more than the other, which led up to harsher punishment, where Black children were being more harshly punished than the others as well. And that they were viewed through a disorder-based lens, like, oh, something must be wrong. We need to create a label. And so what I want to say is that I with us transitioning back, and I think Rashida made a great point, with us transitioning back, it's one thing that I worry about is that, have we forgotten about these narratives? Have we, let's not forget about what we spoke about prior to COVID, and that we need to push or advocate very strongly for our children to have a better outcome, than what we had prior to COVID, because we could be heading into a darker reality once they start to become more into the classroom. And so, yes, I'm really interested, though. I know that we're going to be doing breakout rooms too as well. There was one school that did a really good job right before COVID had hit, in which they saw commonalities, these patterns within one another, and they addressed it at a school. And I worked with them in getting a 10-point plan addressed, and they did it. And not only did their climate improve, but their performance levels as well. So we saw their English and reading scores going up because they were in the classroom. They weren't just easily suspending students. So so I'm really excited to share that work as well.
Thank you very much. I'd like to pass it on again to Amara Sparks.
Thank you, Malik, and thank you, Dr. Dar. Dr. Grace, with your experience, we just don't have enough time to grant you true justice. However, we will try. Given that you are an expert in research on African American children and family when it comes to mundane, extreme environmental stress, please let us know what is MEAS and how your current work with the Cures Book Club and the Village Project's Imiata program is helping Black children and families cope when they otherwise have no means of support.
Well, thank you for that very compound question. I think whoever wrote all these questions did an excellent job of putting 10 or 12 questions in one. But you mentioned mundane extreme environmental stress, and that's work I've been doing since the 90s. And basically, I worked with the late Dr. Chet Pierce, who really, to me, was the one who started really talking about microaggressions at the very first time. And basically, as the past speaker talked about, there's sort of these subtle verbal and nonverbal insults that are directed toward, in this case, people of color, Black folks. And they're sort of layered insults. They're cumulative, they happen every day. And as he mentions, if you're African American, listening and dealing with these is almost like breathing. You're so used to it, sometimes it almost becomes passe, because if you dealt with each of the microaggressions as they came towards you, you'd probably go crazy and you'd have no time to do anything else. So I think it's really important to understand that we are constantly bombarded by these types of microaggressions. For example, oh, he speaks so well, as if, for instance, the past attorney, Colin Powell shouldn't speak so well. I mean, or, you really have good hair, as if straight hair is better than curly hair. So it's those kind of things that just constantly come into our mind space, and they really create unnecessary stress. And Dr. Pierce and I worked together in the 80s to talk about this specific stress, and we labeled it mundane extreme environmental stress. Mundane is because it happens every day. It's like breathing. Extreme because it has an extreme impact on your psychological well-being, whether you are embracing it, like doing everything Afrocentric, or whether you're rejecting it and not wanting to be Black. But no matter where you are, if you are not only phenotypically, but if you understand you have Black heritage, you are responding in some way. So it does have extreme impact on your psychological well-being, but it's environmentally induced. I mean, babies aren't born knowing I'm Black, I'm dark. I'm like, babies come into this world as a clean slate on one level, and that is dealing with race and racism. And all the other things are taught, but it's stressful. Not the wonderful eustress that you have, for instance, getting pimples and getting rid of them as you become older. Not that kind of stress, but very distressful, and can lead to this type of situations that I think the previous speakers have spoke very well about. And so as a result of doing that, I did a book way back in the 90s that focused on this. And I have very good friends who are not academicians, and said, you need to do a everyday book for my beautician so she can read it. And so I did a quick little handbook called Mies and Me, and it just summarizes this concept. But for me, it was more like, well, what do you do with it? We know about it. And so when I retired, having spent years doing research and looking at Black families and children, the first study was done with the late Dr. Jane Carew and the late Marie Peters, called Toddler and Infant Experiences with Young Black Children who are reared at home, looking at the kinds of activities and interactions and environments they live in. I wanted to come up with something that I thought would be doable as a retiree, but also something that I thought would be beneficial. So using that research, I really wanted to focus back on literacy, because as I shared in the very beginning, I think literacy is a true key to so much, and we just don't give it enough play at times, because we often blame children for not knowing how to read once they get older, as opposed to understanding that it's a process of learning that they weren't exposed to. So I wanted to create some books, thinking we'd do little book clubs, and that's how come I created the Wordsmith Jr. to produce these books. And in all the books, I wanted to have 4 themes, because unfortunately, although our children aren't doing well, researchers historically know what works for our children. It's just that we haven't had the will, systematic support to do what we know is right. I mean, what we just heard about the sort of situations our children are finding in. I mean, Ray Risk decades ago in Pygmalion Classroom, where they gave kids random numbers, locker numbers, and told teachers that that was their IQ numbers. And they found that at the end of a period of time, those kids who had lower locker numbers performed less well than those with higher locker numbers. I mean, the kind of racism that has systematically, not only, I think it's grown in different ways. It's sort of changed in different ways, but it's still very much here. So all the things I think the previous speakers have spoken about, I think is so true, but they're not new. They just have other things layered on top of them. So I wanted to create some books that would start very early. So I sort of pushed the Village Project to work with me. And instead of dealing with junior high kids, I pushed very hard that we work with very young kids because I think it starts very early. And in our books, we wanted to make something that kids would understand. So we have titles like, do you have the nerve to learn about verbs? Or can you look around and find the nouns? They're all concrete things dealing with literacy. But in the books, we know that research shows that action, our kids like action. Okay, we're very vervistic. And so we wanted action in them. We wanted high expectations in it because I think too often we dumb down because we have these false expectations for our children. So we didn't want to use baby words. We wanted to use big words. So our ABC book, our A is for armadillos, artsy antics, not A is for apple. We wanted to have them see themselves because if you don't see yourself in these books, you are the afterthought. And we have too often not only been the afterthought, but we haven't been thought about at all. And then we also wanted to have character building in examples because I think children are often told you're good, you're bad, all these kinds of sort of descriptors. But I think the earlier they see positive characteristics housed in Black people, the better. So those were those books we did. When I worked with the Village Project, I think that it would take forever to talk about that project that I love. It's an organization that works with sort of traumatized folks as a result of race and racism, but they do a really restorative, informed counseling. So our first group of kids that we targeted once we got funding to do this were kids who were having these issues, kids who were in counseling, kids who were being seen. And it started out, we wanted to, in our proposal, I think we said we wanted 30 kids, 30 to 40 kids, but we started out with these 15 or 16 the first year. But as the word got out that this was a safe Black space, not only did we reach our numbers, we have a waiting list. And the reason it was a safe Black space was because of everyone who was staffed believed the children were young geniuses and that they could do anything. And so instead of talking specifically about that program, I just wanted to give some characteristics of what things I think worked in that program that are research-based. And the kids have done phenomenally well. But we started with an Afrocentric theme, thinking that too often we hear all the things about the jungle and Tarzan, but very little about what truly was Africa. So we have very Afrocentric habits and rituals theme. We start with libations, we talk about bringing in ancestors, we show gratitude. We do a lot of repetition because we know that repetition for little kids works. So they know what libation means at the very beginning, 1 or 2, but now we sometimes have to tell people, oh, you've already done one already. We need to give everybody opportunity. We know that our kids thrive under active task engagement. When little kids are moving is because they want to be engaged in something. So we give them some proactive things to be engaged in. And we tell all of our speakers that that is one of the criteria for them coming, that they do something or share something or have the kids participate in something that gets them active. Their speakers, you know, we got some critique on this, but all of our initial speakers, I guess all of our current speakers are African-American. We have volunteers who aren't, but the idea is that we want to expose our children to Black role models and speakers across the spectrum so they could be exposed to all the possibilities. So we have physicians, people who work in sciences, people who are rappers, people who are young entrepreneurs around cooking, et cetera. Also, as I think a previous speaker mentioned, we want something for children to be, it's child-centered. Like when we see an issue, we deal with that issue with that child from that child's perspective, as opposed to automatically assuming what is right. We know by research that warm demanders are the best teachers. So a lot of our teachers say we love Black kids, but loving is not going to give them the skills that they need. So warm demanding and focus on respect and discipline is something that we do. We have active parent and community engagement. We believe in mindfulness, that the children should experience the joy of the moment because many of them have things that in their past and things that will be in the future that aren't going to be as joyful as the time we want to make for them there. We also want to disentangle the revisionist history about African people of African descent. you know, our lives didn't start with slavery. So we often bring in, I mean, the name of the project is the Eminata Program. And we had Eminata warriors who heard about it on the one newsfeed and actually brought Eminata warriors to the session so the kids could see them. And the most moving thing for me after that session, one of the parents called in and said, you know, my son at the age of 6, he was sort of tearful. And I was wondering, and I asked him, did the Eminata warriors scare you? Or was there something wrong? And he told her, no, Mom, they were praying for me. They were singing songs for me, you know, and you know, she said for him to be 6 years old and understanding that concept and that connection was amazing. And finally, we really believe in coalition building. I mean, all our children know all people started from Africa. So although all of our speakers are Black, because we have a different agenda as adults for them at that, they know that everyone who comes in has an African origin. And so all these things come together for us. And for me, it's like culminating, you know, 40 years of research in one little project. And I just love it. And so I'm going to leave it at there. So, because I know I spoke more than 5 minutes, but I'll leave it at there and deal with questions later.
Thank you, Dr. Grace Carroll. Thank you to all the other speakers. I'll turn it back over to Katrina Hassan Hamilton now.
Thank you, Mara. So proud of you and Malik and all of the amazing panelists. This is, I don't know what to say. This has been absolutely phenomenal, and just so grateful that all of you are here with us today. So again, Muhammad is not here with us, but we will be sending out his work. And I do want to say one of the things, to touch up on a couple of things that were mentioned. Dr. Carroll talked about the Village Project, in particular the Eminata project that she's doing. And as Dr. Estienne had mentioned earlier, that, you know, there's this tendency to group or lump all of us into one being. You know, when you're Blackest, we are phenomenal. We are one people, but we come in, we're diverse. We were diverse when we were brought over here, and we're diverse to this day. And so with that said, when I was in Monterey and Seaside, I wanted my child to be a part of Eminata just so that she could see people who looked like her. You know, so it's really important that our children see folks who look like them and who, like Dr. Carroll said, care about them. I also want to mention that, and I will put it in the chat, that Dr. Estienne has co-authored or has a study. She and Dr. Wood has a study, as she mentioned, about parents of Black preschoolers. And so if you're interested in participating in that study, please participate, and we'll also send it out. So on that note, one of the things that I do want to share with all of you before we go into our breakout rooms is this. I'm sorry. I'm so overwhelmed with emotion because I'm calling Rashida Dr. Carroll, Dr. Estienne, Salam, Rashida, amazing, just absolutely amazing. So we all know about the Los Angeles Unified School District, their recent, their recent defunding of the police, right? And so, and this is education, whether you know it or not, education can be political. So I don't want to get into a discussion about whether or not we should, you know, defund or reform, but I do want to say that the work that they did was absolutely amazing. The board voted to take that money and to literally divert it towards programs for African American students. And so as we go into our group chats or our breakout rooms, I want us to think about if we had an opportunity wherever we are, whether it's San Diego, whether it's, you know, Monterey County, LA County, you could be wherever you are. What would you do if your school board voted to cut its police force and divert funding for Black student achievement? How would that look? Would it look like having more trauma-informed practices? Would it be more literacy programs? what would that look like? So you have roughly about, I would say, maybe 40 minutes. We're going to break you out into rooms. The first room will be breakout room. One will be with Dr. Carroll. Breakout room 2 is going to be with Rashida and Salam, and then breakout room 3 is going to be with Dr. Idara. So we're just going to randomly assign you, and I guarantee you, no matter what room you're in, you're going to be in for a treat. So we'll see you back here in about 40 minutes. Right, as we are returning back, there were amazing conversations going out on in each of our 3 breakout rooms. So sorry we had to come back, but we do want to have time for you all to share out, what was discussed, and we want to hear closing remarks from our speakers too. So I am going to go ahead and turn it back over to Malik. Malik's like, really?
Hello. Yes, we had some really good points in our group, and I'd like to invite the people who want to represent to share them out.
Oh, I can start. Hello, everyone. So glad to be on this call today. And Katrina, I want to commend you on really putting this together. I'm the education chair, NAACP education chair in Stockton, and I've been really trying to get all the good resources I can get everywhere. So we're going to have to do the same thing, Katrina, here in Stockton, because it's amazing. Now, and so we talked a little bit about trauma-informed care and teaching, as well as culturally responsive teaching. And both of these areas I've been looking into a lot here in the Stockton area as a whole, because we have a lot of trauma, okay? And the lack of resources in those areas, okay? And like I mentioned in our group, that we really have to understand that there's a budgeting process that starts from the top, from the trustees through the superintendent, but basically there's an LCAP funding process that everybody that needs to get support needs to be included in that process. And if you don't know how to get involved in it, call the superintendent of your school district or the county office of education, and they will let you know how you can get involved in that process. But certainly your voice matter, but you've got to show up not late for this party. You've got to show up early and be prepared to really engage. So at any rate, thank you, everyone. Nice to talk.
I was in the same group as Bruce. Just want to talk about something else that me and another member, Mr. Rashada, were talking about, implementing an equity school team for each school site. I'm actually drafting our plan up for the following school year. I work out of Richmond, California. I have a plan for a 3-tier process where we address the entire staff. We create small groups that each member of the equity team is responsible for. And each equity team member will be responsible for mentoring a new teacher to our site. One of the biggest problems in my area is we have large turnovers within our staff every year, and we get new members who are not trained in the discussions around race and equity. And I would think this process right here could help catch them up to where we're at. And I mean, the whole point is to inform our staff on toxic stress, trauma, implicit bias, cultural awareness. Ultimately, we need more products from our community in our classroom. Right now, our staff does not reflect our demographics of our school. We need to figure out a way to encourage and maintain members from our community in our classroom to work with our children. And being a teacher for the last 15 years, and I'm moving into administration, but being a teacher, I know how important the relationship is between teachers and students. And it is upon the teacher to go out of their way to build these relationships on trust and respect, where they can create a safe place for their students so their voice can be heard. All right. Too often we have teachers in the classroom demanding students fit a certain mold and act a certain way. We can't have that anymore. We got a chance to re-envision the way our classrooms look and sound like. We need our teachers to make the change and create the safe places where our students feel safe enough to explain to them what's going on in their lives. Also, we need policy change. Okay, it's no longer okay to debate over dollars. Like I know Bruce mentioned the LCAP. We can't do it. We need to go to the state. We need policy change. We need mandated numbers on school counselors and psychologists. My school site has over 700 students with no counselors and a part-time psychologist in Richmond, California. We need policy change. Debating over dollars with the board or the trying to put this into the LCAP no longer works. We need policy change, and we need people to be held accountable if they do not allocate those dollars for those resources. Thank you, everyone.
I'd actually like to segue off of this. I was in the same group. I, as a student, it gives me hope hearing all these ideas coming up in the room, because knowing that people are aware that when we have issues that aren't being addressed or aren't being heard, it makes me feel better, because it makes me know that someone knows, right? Being in school, like you said, there isn't really any staff I could go to personally and think like, oh, I need to talk to this person because I need help with something. I feel like establishing a better relationship with the staff is very important, and hearing staff and people come up with all these ideas makes me personally, it makes me pretty hopeful for like future generations. So I'd like to thank everyone from my room, because hearing a lot of the points really it made my day. Thank you.
I would like to share what we spoke of in the room that's leading the conversation right now. I'm Ramona Jones, and my comment was about socioeconomic solutions. I mean, we're speaking about the things that we need to fund, things that have been overlooked, and we can identify those 10-point plans and submit them through LCAP proposals. However, as Black communities coming together and synchronizing our specialties and synchronizing our priorities, it is apparent that the reason why we are here is because of lack of economic development. And Dream Builders Youth Mentoring Network focuses on the leading cause, which is address the money issues, create your own reinvestment initiative that you can connect and sponsor different communities around the nation. And then thereby you have the attention of the people that normally is holding the purse or the money. And I would like to work and collaborate with any person or any entities that want to address not only the academic inequities, but also the socioeconomic inequities. If we fund through a resident leadership academy type of programming and help educate our parents that are available and pay them to be available, then now we position ourselves like PTAs, we position ourselves like affluent communities to not only address the problems we want to focus on, but to fund it. So LCAP funding is wonderful, but if you want to fight all day for the next 10 years to get in position so that some of the initiatives can be addressed, how about creating millions so that then you just go and do it? And so that's where my attention has been for the last 4 years. We have a project called Driven to Win, 10,000 Books, 10,000 Dreams, Read to Win Campaign Challenge. And we're looking at 3 priorities. We're looking at student leadership, reading literacy, and financial literacy, and working with real estate brokers in the most devastated urban communities from Philadelphia, Newark, Baltimore, Dallas, Houston, all those cities that are addressing everything that we're talking about today. We're bringing millions into those cities and funding those priorities because there's been lacks and inequity so long that now that we've awakened to say, hey, we're not getting our fair share. Now we got to go into the economic discussion. How about getting the money through real estate and land development and giving our Black students a trust fund so that they can control their own futures instead of waiting for policies and systems to catch up to their growing. Every single year they get older. And so what we're talking about is being able to address their current situations now, not 2 years from now and not 3 years from now. So that's all I want to say. And thank you so much for this. This is absolutely brilliant. Shout out to NAACP San Diego. You all are doing an absolute marvelous job.
Our group was phenomenal, Katrina. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Idara. Right, Mara.
Yes.
Let's talk about your group, Dr. Grace. Did you all have, is there anyone in your group who would like to talk about what was discussed?
Okay. Yeah. Is there anybody that would like to speak that was in my group with Dr. Grace? I know we were still talking before the breakout room ended. Is there anything anybody wants to say now? No.
I'll say something.
Okay. Thank you.
I appreciate the entire experience today. I've taken a few courses on micro aggressions, and this has been a spinoff, and it has put into my heart where I was focusing to return into the workforce because my son is just now turned 18. He will be graduating this year. Now I'm thinking about maybe I need to try to focus my educational background to target our young Black men and make sure that I am in a position to give them the tools that they need to thrive, regardless of an environment that they're living in. So they'll be informed of how to handle themselves and given the tools to thrive, regardless of at home where it may not be supportive, but outside of home where it may not be supportive, they will be able to stand on their own with their tools. So yeah, I'm very grateful for being here today. Thank you so very much. I learned a lot in our breakout room. I know I was supposed to say that. But my heart just went there and I had to share. So thank you.
Well, no, thank you, Ms. McFarland Stagg. And again, you know, your breakout room, all of our speakers are amazing, but you were in there with Dr. Grace Carroll, who was in there with the father of microaggressions. You know, her mentor is Dr. Chester Pierce. So, you know, it's all relevant. So thank you. Velma, you had your hand up. Would you like to share out?
I was trying, I don't know if you were going into the order of breakout rooms, so that was why I pulled my hand back down because I was waiting.
Oh yeah, so
I was in breakout room 3. So
yes, okay, so before you start with breakout room 3, and thank you, is there anyone else who was in Dr. Grace Carroll's amazing room who would like to speak? Feel like we're in a meeting, so I don't want that to happen. It's a Saturday. So
Hi, Katrina, this is Ann. And I did want to, one of the things that came up I thought was super important was paying parents who are taking time out of their busy lives to come to meetings and be an oversight for, and a sort of a dashboard for how well the school is doing. So when we write grants to, you know, find that funding to pay parents, but also to support parents. Like, you know, you can provide, someone could go on behalf of the parents to these meetings and speak on behalf of the parents. There could be like a parent representative that speaks on behalf of the parents. But really important to have some enforcement of the oversight to make any kind of parental comment have some force at the school board level so that there are changes being made. And I do appreciate the comment that we really need to think about and engage with parents in a way that addresses the racism and the trauma they experienced themselves when they were going through oftentimes the same school system. So helping with that.
Thank you so much, Ann. And so
I would like to just share something from Dr. Grace's group as well. The conversation started where I was sharing how my parent, we were bussed out, and my parent said that they sent a bus for the parents from the neighborhood that I was in to go out to the PTA meetings for the area I was bussed into, which was a predominantly white area, and how my mom was saying there was only one parent that participated. And so I want to thank you guys for giving me some solutions instead of just like the lady was saying, the first lady was saying, instead of blaming the parents and all of that, and making us understand the value of the parent in their role and how we can get resources to them instead of just, you know, and how we can be a part of the solution. And so now I have 5 daughters and they're all grown now, but I was thinking about my granddaughter. and just becoming more active. I work at Long Beach City College, and our students, our African American male students, are our most disproportionately impacted students on campus. And so, with that being said, I've been trying to figure out a way how to be a part of the solution there as well. And just to see where the students are coming from, just to see the backgrounds and everything, everybody sharing from the preschool level to the 12th grade. And so when they get to us, why they're in the shape that they're in. And I really, really appreciate everybody's input and everybody sharing and being transparent so that we can learn today. And I just appreciate being here, and thank you for everything.
No, thank you, Ms. Folks. And so because I'm looking at the time, it's 11:57, and I, want to ask all of you for an additional maybe 5 minutes, because we want to be mindful to group 3, and we also want to, close out and pay our homage to our amazing panelists and moderators and all of you. So with that said, I'm going to move on to group 3, and thank you. Yes, who's sharing out for group 3?
I think
that
Velma.
Velma? I thought
Yeah.
it was Velma. Yes, thank you, Ms. Rashida.
I just want to say thank you to San Diego NAACP again. I am from the Northern California region. I'm a proud member of the East County branch of the NAACP. My daughter, Clarissa, is at the San Diego State College chapter. She is the political action and education chair there. She'll be going into her junior year next year. But I wanted to just say kudos to everyone, because it's amazing that one of the things that we talked about in that, and I brought to the forefront, is the parent piece, because I am a parent, and coming from a parent lens, in this area in Contra Costa County, I brought forward creating a parent space, and we collaborated to bring the Parent Advisory Committee, and we have it in 3 different phases. We have the DLAC, which is for our English language learners, and then we have the African American Parent Advisory, and then we have the General Parent Advisory. And all of these parents in this space have an opportunity to let their voice be heard. But one of the also things that I have been pushing and to advocate for is to create that space to where parents actually are cross-trained. We hear so much that we want our teachers to be further educated, and we want our teachers to get cross-trained. But what about talking to those families and to those parents who have not went past middle or high school, and let alone into college, and giving them a space to where now they have school-age children, and they want those children to be able to aspire to do better than what they've done by being able to create a space for those parents to be trained and educated to now be those teachers that we want to see in our classroom. What a huge way to empower not only those families, but those parents. And so that was one of the other things. And then, I also wanted to just state, how many of you know that PTA, when we talk about PTA, the oldest advocacy parent ran group in this nation, when you talk about PTA, how many really know that PTA was founded on the shoulders of an African American woman? And it's a shame that when I look at our PTAs now, that we are the smallest in the population that are doing things in reference to PTA. And I said, rest in power, Selena Sloan Butler, because your work will never be forgotten as long as I'm alive and I can breathe and talk. Because so I'm very big in PTA, and I think it's important that we revisit why PTA has grown to where it has, and then why our white counterpart has actually taken on, and it looks a little different than what Selena Sloan Butler had envisioned. So I challenge each of you that are parents or educators. PTA stands for Parent Teacher Association, and we need to remember and reflect on that as we look at those goals and those missions. So we talked a lot about, and I'm just so proud of those that were moderating and facilitating in that breakout room, because were able to capture some really good forethought. And we talked about the LCAP, and we talked about being able to really be able to make those funding dollars work for us. But also, I talked about those parents being able to know that there's trades, get into trade schools, and being able to know, get back into glorified home economics and being able to teach our students foreign language. You know, I mentioned a story. I went into a DLAC meeting. They didn't realize, a lot of those parents didn't realize that I was bilingual. And they looked at me because I was African American. They thought I didn't belong. And I told them, this is an example in their language. I told them this is another example of what you may face when somebody looks at you. You just did it to me and didn't even realize the racial bias that you just had on your own. So we also need to remember, grab those mirrors and look at each other, look at ourselves, and make sure that we're doing what we can to make sure we're empowering and not denigrating or making anyone feel less than.
Thank you, Velma. And before we go on, there was a hand that was overlooked. Christina, did you have something to say? Because I know you were in my group and I didn't see your hand before.
No problem. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak and share. I just want to say that I'm extremely proud of the NAACP for hosting this event today. And not just the San Diego chapter. I know you guys are hosting this event, but I'm proud of all chapters of the NAACP. I'm proud of each and every person on this line that joined, for getting up today and just making sure that they could allocate their time to give time to our community and to our world, because that's what this is all about, is making changes in communities one step at a time, one day at a time, one person at a time, one adult at a time, one child. And I just thank each and every one of you personally. I thank the leaders. I thank you guys for your stories and your journeys, whatever you have gone through, whatever reason you were destined to be a part of NAACP. I am so grateful for just every bit of your guys' stories. I am extremely proud of any youth that is on this line. I'm so proud. It takes courage to come on this line as a youth and to get up and stand up and to fight for your community. It takes courage to come on here and speak up. So for those youth that have spoken up and that are here on this line, I am so proud of each and every one of you, and I want you to know that. I'm proud of you for listening, for learning, for educating yourselves. And I'm proud of you because I know you guys are going to break cycles and you're going to share with your peers about what you learned. I'm proud of those that are on this line that are not African American. I'm proud of you guys because it takes courage as well. I'm proud of us that are African American that go into other communities that are not African American, and we continue to stand and change things as well. But I wanted to make sure that I gave all due respect to those leaders that pour their hearts out when nobody knows how long they're sitting up at night. Nobody knows the emails they're drafting. Nobody knows the people they're trying to help in the community. But I don't want them to think that it goes underlooked or overlooked, because it's appreciated so much. And I'm so grateful at this time that organizations like this are doing whatever they can, even if it is just via Zoom, because you're helping people one Zoom at a time. And I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful. I just encourage everybody to continue to educate yourselves any way you can. Join as many organizations as you can. But I can tell you this, stay positive and stay grateful. Find something grateful out of your day, and not just, what do I not have? Who am I not talking to? What about who you are talking to? What about what you do have good? You have air in your lungs, do something with it, and that's all I can say. I can encourage you to be positive to somebody. Everybody needs someone positive. Even we need positive people around us. So I encourage you, when you're walking down the street and you see somebody who needs something, just tell them hi. How's your day? Tell them how your day is going. But I just wanted to say thank you so much for whatever it took to put this program together. I thank you for the youth and the adults that inspire you guys as well, leaders, because I know I've worked for nonprofits my entire life. I know the vision and the purpose behind it comes from inspirational people that inspire us too. Everything we do comes from somebody else. It's the gift or the seed they put in us. or it's our own cycles and generations that we want to break. So I just wanted to take a moment and say I'm proud of every single person on this line, whether I know you or not, because I know you now. And I'm so grateful to just have been a part of this organization, even if it was for an hour. I'm grateful and I'm honored for every breakout room, every person that made sure if they got kicked out or their line was wrong. I'm proud of every one of us for being on here and taking a stance. So thank you for giving me the opportunity and for a moment to speak. I just pray every one of you guys, sorry, I hope every one of you guys have an amazing day, just doing everything you can to keep yourself positive and someone else as well. And thank you for allowing me to speak. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Christina. As a youth, I feel pretty good hearing that. It makes me feel good, like people being positive. I feel like I should promote that more. Walk down the street, so just tell someone you say hey. But as we close, I'd like to invite our panelists to make some last statements. So, Dr. Grace, would you mind leaving us with any closing remarks on why support is critical for increasing Black parent involvement in schools?
I think all of us understand the extreme importance of the persons who rear us, whether they're our immediate parents, whether they're foster parents, whether they're adopted parents. And it's critical for us as educators to engage them because they know the children better than anyone. And I think this forum has been very instrumental in at least having that conversation where those of us who are in somewhat power positions or those of us who work with parents get a more clear understanding of the various stressors and various institutional systematic kinds of things that our parents are dealing with. And hopefully through our exchanges, we understand that even though we might not be able to change the whole system right away, that whatever small thing we can do to encourage and participate and get them to understand their power, that we should do it. And I appreciated the young lady who just spoke, because I too feel that gratitude and us feeling positive and continuing whatever it is that we need to nourish ourselves so we can continue the work, although we may be tired and some of us may be old, that we continue to push forward.
Thank you so much. I'd like to pass it on to Mara.
Thank you, Dr. Grace and Christina, just for your kind words and answers. And I also want to thank everybody else here that's in the Zoom meeting and just seeing all the resources and tools that everybody's trying to spread to each other. And it's actually it's very incredible. Like, I didn't know that there were so many people that actually cared about things that were going on, or even in school, on social media, I just seen so many youths and students stressed out, especially during quarantine and everything that's going on. And I just really happy to see everybody trying to make a difference in the world and in our community. I would like to, as we close, I'd like to ask Dr. Idara, can you leave us with any closing remarks on why support is critical for increasing Black parent involvement in schools?
I believe parents are the driving force, and I agree with everyone here, and I'll keep my remarks very, very short because it's hard to follow Dr. Carol's amazing words, but we have to keep pushing, we have to keep moving, and we can't stop, and this was very inspiring, and I know we're going to do great work and we're going to keep going. So thank you, NAACP. I appreciate this time. This has really given me the energy to keep the work that we're doing on our end. So thank you.
Pass it back to Malik now.
Thank you, Dr. Idira. And being in your group, it made me happy today because it made me realize that people, even though we think, especially as a kid, a lot of us think we aren't being heard, but there's a lot of support out there. I'd like to invite Mrs. Rashida to leave us with any closing remarks on why support is critical for increasing Black parent involvement in schools.
Well, I just first want to say thank you for this platform. I caught myself becoming emotional several times throughout this meeting because oftentimes I feel as though I'm alone in wanting to see the changes that we're discussing happen. And it filled my cup to know that there's so many of us advocating for so many great things for the young people in our community. And so this has been just so refreshing. It was phenomenal. I'm so grateful to have been a part of it. There's not an additional thing that I can add that hasn't been mentioned that is just that to this conversation. So thank everyone who has shared, because you've given me so much inspiration and hope, and I look forward to continued works. Thank you guys. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Rashida. I'd like to pass it back to Mara.
Thank you, Ms. Rashida. And Malik, as we close, I'd like to ask Ms. Salam, can you leave us with any closing remarks on what support is critical for increasing Black parent involvement in schools?
Thank you. This forum, I think you said it right when you said it's incredible. So I feel fed, I feel full. But I think it's crucial because who knows us better than our parents? Who knows, and that nurturing and the love that we're not getting in the K through 12 or even higher education are, imagine if like Velma, she was in my group and her sharing what she's doing with her children and beyond that, what that would look like, because we know our children better than anyone else. So thank you.
If I could just say something really, really quick, I'll be brief. I do want to share just a broader perspective on guardianship and parenting. As a behavioral therapist going into the homes of many, you have the privilege of knowing this. And this is something I'm going to just openly share with everyone, just for information, so you guys know a sensitivity can be an issue sometimes with some families and some communities. It's not just about your guardians and your parents all the time. Some kids grow up in broken homes and they don't have that trust level with their guardians and their parents. Sometimes your neighbor raises you. Sometimes your community raises you. Sometimes your church raises you. Sometimes a total stranger who has been placed in your path raises you. So just so you know, and I'm not trying to say this in a way where I'm offending parents or I'm offending guardians. I just want to help people understand that we should be sensitive of how we say parent, parent, parent all the time, because parents are sometimes parents that are not by birth. They come in many walks and many forms. So your birth parent, out the door. Try your best, and this is just encouraging advice from experience, to include saying guardian or parent, because sometimes your guardian is a walking angel that was placed in your life. And it could be your manager from your first job. It could be your manager from your third job. It could be a postal service person that's constantly checking on you because they know you're in a broken home. So I just encourage you guys, when you're talking about raising up a community, and I'm talking adults too. Adults grow up with barriers and traumas that they never got healed. And that's what we've been talking about all day today. Sometimes they were raised by somebody else and it wasn't their biological parent. And sometimes it is. I'm just sharing this with you guys because I want everybody to know from what I've experienced, and what helped me so much working in the community was making sure I was so sensitive to how I introduced myself and how I acknowledged the guardianship, because like we talked about, there's foster care, there's group homes and things like those are people's parents too. Those are people's care providers. So I just want everybody to know it's not always about a parent, because our parents come in many scopes. And that is a good thing though, because they help to change things and break cycles.
Thank you, Christina. Yes, absolutely. And can you, Christina, do you mind placing your information in the chat, because we are already over time and what you have to say is extremely relevant. So please place your information in the chat so that we can have people contact you. You're amazing. We're so grateful that you're here. I just want to thank all of us for being here. Thank you. Thank our amazing panelists, Dr. Grace Carroll, Dr. Idara Essia, Salam Christos, and Rashida Hamid. I want to thank our amazing moderators, Malik and Mara. So proud of you. I have tears in my eyes because I am trying not to cry. Mara is my niece. Dina, let Joe know I am adopting Malik. I have two Maliks now, Mara's brother and now Malik. So we cannot wait to see all of the great things that you all are going to do and all of the youth that are here today. On that note, I just want to say thank you to our president. Thank you to all the people behind the scenes. Please, if you don't know about the San Diego NAACP, NAACP San Diego branch, please go to our website, sandiegonaacp.org. Join. We welcome you. Join any branch. AXO, speaking of youth, Afro Academic, Cultural, Scientific, Technological Olympics is a program for young people like Malik and Mara. I see Zena, your son is there. So we need our youth to join AXO. As a matter of fact, at 2:00 today, we're having a writer's workshop. So just let's keep the conversation going. Save the date, March 22nd, 2021. We're going to email you. We will email you all the resources for each and every panelist today, along with today's recording and day one's Why Black Teachers Matter. So on that note, being mindful of your time, we appreciate you all. I bid you peace and have a wonderful Saturday. Thank you for being here with us today.